This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. A cattle market update from Oklahoma State University livestock economist Derrell Peel begins the show as he talks about the mixture in the futures cash and box beef market. He also comments on questions he is frequently asked. Continuing the show are four Kansas Agriculture and Rural Leadership Program participants, Trevor Pederson, Ryan Gilliland, Lisa Schemm and Janae McKinney, as they share about their current international tour in Brazil. Drew Ricketts, K-State wildlife specialist, ends today's show as he discusses benefits and issues turkey vultures can cause. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Monday show with a cattle market update from Oklahoma State University livestock economist Derrell Peel. Derrell, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Derrell, what are we seeing when we just look at the overall cattle market right now?
You know, the overall cattle market continues to be extremely strong and very resilient. There's been obviously lots of things thrown at it lately, and there's a long list of things that, that kind of lurk out there as I described them the other day as shoes to fall or could potentially fall. But at the same time, this market is just incredibly strong. The supply and the demand fundamentals are both very, very much in place and continuing the same story that we've had. So, we're going to continue on the same path here and we're basically building yet to ever higher cattle prices in general.
How are fed and feeder cattle looking?
Yeah, so, again, we've had some volatility lately. Feeder cattle markets in particular have been very resilient. Obviously, we've had lots of shocks going back to, several things. We got a bunch of geopolitical stuff going on right now, and yet the markets have bounced back very strongly. We've got some summer grazing demand for lightweight cattle that's kicking in, and we need to talk about drought a little bit because that's a big threat at this point. Fed cattle markets have been a little more sideways, trying to, kind of get their feet under them at a good level, but they had pulled back just a little bit here recently. And of course, we've been struggling a little bit lately to figure out kind of the implications of the capacity issues with changes in packing plant capacity, and more recently, a strike that has taken another plant offline. So, but again, these markets are generally still in very, very strong hands.
Are you concerned at all about that packing plant going offline with the strike?
Well, I think we expect it to be pretty temporary. So obviously longer term, probably not. And I don't think it had huge impacts on the market because, everybody kind of saw it coming. I mean, the company itself, anticipating that it might happen, started making arrangements ahead of time. And the rest of the market as well, to whatever extent they could, kind of had it factored in, I guess. And so it has a little bit of a psychological impact, I think it has. But overall, it's not been a major factor. And it's not like when you get a shock when a plant burns or something unexpectedly, nowhere near the kinds of contortions that you would see in that kind of a situation where a plant unexpectedly goes offline.
Derrell, how are things looking for boxed beef?
We've had an extremely strong start to the year here in boxed beef, continuing, again, part of that robust fundamentals. The demand fundamentals have been very strong. And so we started out, normally we see boxed beef prices pick up pretty strong seasonally in April. That's the wholesale buying that's getting ready for Memorial Day and the start of grilling season. We started at least a month early this year with a pretty strong uptick in boxed beef prices. And if you look at it, it was pretty broad-based if you look at the individual cuts, but it certainly included the middle meats that you would expect to be part of that, as well as we continue to see very strong prices for the round, just because of a lean basis and the demand for lean in the market today. And even the chuck products, some of them that normally are a little bit weaker this time of year, have at least been pretty stable.
And you made a mention earlier about summer grazing and the impacts of drought. And so as you're talking with producers and being in Oklahoma, what concerns do you have?
I tell you, the drought situation continues to expand in a very scary way for this time of the year across the country. And so, a large percentage of the U.S. is in some stage of drought right now. And I did some looking the other day. If you look at the top 10 beef cow states, which collectively have about 57% of the beef cows in the country, 63% of those cows in those 10 states are under some level of drought. So that works out mathematically to be about 36% of the beef cows in the country under drought in those top 10 states. If you expand that to the top 15 states, add the next 5 states in there, you bring that total up to 44% of all the beef cows in the country are in some stage of drought in those 15 states. And it goes beyond that even. So, again, this time of the year is really scary for drought. A spring drought is the worst possible case, right? Because we're trying to green up a little bit. In the southern plains, spring is going to move north here from this point forward. And if you start off dry and you lose the early part of pasture and hay growth in any region, you can really set up the possibility of a very limited entire grazing season. So, droughts that happen in the second half of the year, we can kind of deal with because we made forage in the first half. But when you start off not making forage in the first half, it can be a really long year. And that's the threat that's out there right now.
And have you seen a past example of us having a spring drought and how cattle producers and the market have handled it?
Well, I tell you, I vividly remember, the last cattle cycle low that we got into, the cattle cycle inventory low was in 2014. But what set that up was particularly an extremely strong drought in the southern plains. And it really started in the fall of 2010, but we didn't really recognize it until the spring of 2011, when spring didn't come in Texas and Oklahoma primarily, and the immediately surrounding areas. And so in 1 year's time, we took about 1 million head of beef cows out of the beef cattle industry that contributed to that liquidation. And, again, that process of winding up smaller than we intended to be. We've been in drought the last 5 years across much of the U.S., much of the time, and nearly everybody has been impacted by it. And so, again, we find ourselves smaller than we intended to be. We should be near a low. Certainly the market is telling us we need to stop liquidating and stabilize and rebuild. And yet Mother Nature is going to dictate whether that's possible this year. So this spring drought is pretty scary going forward. There's lots of time to fix it too, if rains come. But if they don't come, then it's going to be a really long year.
If we look at the overall picture, then a constant thing when we talk about the cattle market, low supplies, can we afford to make our herd any smaller than what it already is?
It's going to be a real challenge if we do. Obviously, the tight supplies we have, we've got market prices trying to provide incentives to stop that. And incentivize particularly at the cow-calf level. And yet, again, Mother Nature and the weather will dictate what we have to do. So I guess if we have to go smaller because we don't have a choice, then we'll figure out a way to afford it. But it's really going to create some interesting situations and very challenging situations. Producers may have record high prices, but if you don't have any cattle, it's not much help to you. And at the same time, lack of beef production is going to continue to be an issue in terms of high beef prices for consumers.
And wanting to touch on a few of your frequently asked questions as a livestock economist, Derrell, and starting off thinking about beef, what about Argentina?
So that's come up. Obviously, it's been a political issue since last fall. The idea of importing more beef, and Argentina was specifically noted. Argentina is a very minor part of our beef imports. It was about 2.5% last year. A month or two ago, the administration expanded a tariff rate quota to Argentina, so now they can significantly increase from their previous quota level at a zero tariff rate. And they probably will. They'll probably export a little bit more. It still will be a very minor part of our total beef imports. But what's important here is that the market ultimately is determining how much beef we import. And ultimately then, on a country by country basis, figuring out who's going to supply that beef that the market wants in the U.S. And so if we increase from Argentina, more than likely that will simply displace some of the imports that are currently coming from much larger sources. Australia and Brazil being the two largest ones. And so, we probably won't see that much net change in the U.S. in total imports in any event. And Argentina by itself is not big enough to have much of an impact.
And one more question that you're frequently getting asked that you commented on before we started this. What concerns are cattle producers having about beef on dairy calves?
We've seen tremendous change the last few years because of the reproductive technology available to the dairy industry. Now it's available to everybody, but utilized heavily in the dairy industry so that they can target heifer production with sex semen. That frees up the something approaching 2/3 of the dairy cows then can be bred to beef semen to produce these crossbred calves. And obviously, with the market values we see today, that's been a tremendous incentive for them. And it's, the beef industry sort of taken notice for the first time in that process. And so it's a frequent question. What are we going to do with these beef on dairy calves? And I've had to remind beef producers for the last couple of years that we're not really getting any new amount of calves. The dairy herd hasn't changed much in size. It fluctuates relatively little compared to the beef cow herd. And those dairy cows have been having calves all along. And when they were straight bred dairy animals, half of those were bull calves by natural service, and so we've been utilizing those dairy animals as a part of the beef industry for a long time. So it's really not a new set of animals. They just look different now, and they've become a little more obvious in some cases. But it doesn't really change the overall production level that much. Now, there's certainly some carcass implications. The reason for crossbreeding is to change those carcasses, improve the quality of them. And so there's some meat market implications there, but in terms of the overall supply and demand situation, really not changing it that much with the beef on dairy.
Derrell, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
You bet. Happy to be here.
That was Oklahoma State University livestock economist Derrell Peel. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show talking with a few Class 17 participants in the Kansas Agriculture and Rural Leadership Program as they are currently on their international tour to Brazil. Today, we'll hear from Trevor Pederson, Ryan Gilliland, Lisa Schemm, and Janae McKinney. Trevor, starting with you from Hiawatha. Trevor, what has it been like being in Brazil?
It's been very interesting to see how the technology that is betrayed from the United States to Brazil on farming at large scale, the stuff we've seen so far, like whether that's citrus farms or pulp factories or even coffee farms, the big machinery and the technology behind it is not up to what it's betrayed sometimes, from my understanding. But we have not headed north to where the really big farming occurs, so maybe that will change as we move farther north in our tour.
Do you see some strong similarities between Brazil and the U.S.?
Yes, which I'm sure with the next person you'll have on here, which is Ryan, he'll say the same thing. I think after Carlos had talked about that Brazil is a new country, and after you fully comprehend that, you understand a little bit more of why their infrastructure, why the farming is a little bit more the way it is, because in reality, down here, it kind of feels like we're in the 1930s for the United States, maybe, or something along those lines. It's still building, still growing.
What have been some interesting things you've learned or seen there that you're excited to bring back home with you?
It's been interesting to see how much they are able to integrate machinery and human labor, and how the teamwork works there, how the machine will do the major part of the work. On like coffee farms, it'll shake them. They still need a crew that goes through to pick up the berries that have fallen on the ground. Or like the citrus farm, there's still a crew that goes through and double checks that everything's good.
So, Trevor, have you had coffee there, and does it taste different?
It is significantly better here.
Any other cool things you've seen in Brazil that you'd like to share with other farmers and ranchers in Kansas?
The amount of labor that goes into like controlling pests and weeds here is extremely more than in the United States. So they're spraying, like on citrus farms, they're spraying every 14 days for insects.
That was Trevor Pederson from Hiawatha. Now we're joined by Ryan Gilliland from Topeka. Ryan, how has it been in Brazil?
So I had very few expectations heading into the trip. So this has been certainly eye-opening for me. You know, I was born in Colby and grew up mostly in Concordia. So I have an appreciation for, rural life to an extent, but I also live in Topeka now. But I had never left the country prior to this. So this is an absolute first for me. And it's been very interesting so far. I've really enjoyed the experience.
And what have been some of the most interesting experiences, in your opinion?
Well, we just came from the tour of a hydroelectric facility, which I have never gone through one of those. I've never been to Hoover Dam or any of those things domestically. So just understanding the mechanics of it and the civil engineering feat that something like that requires was really impressive. And the time in which they conceived that, constructed it, got the entire thing done, given all that goes into a project that massive, which also shares ownership with Paraguay. So not only are you building this unbelievable facility, but you're doing it in concert with another country and co-owning it. It's just fascinating on a number of levels. So
you made a mention of the speed of the project, so much faster than you would have expected or much slower?
I don't know if I had an expectation of how long it would or should take. It's just so grand in scale. It amazes me that they could even come up with the project. Beyond that, it's been really interesting to see how another country, which is a much younger country, and I think that has really it really helps you understand why certain areas may have issues, certain areas have really accelerated. And, if you use the frame of what America may have been like back in the 1930s, now with the advent of instant technology and access to knowledge, like we've never had then, and think about Brazil now in that context, that's been sort of interesting. So I know that's a long-winded, sort of nebulous answer, but that's kind of where my head's at the moment, mid-trip. So.
And Ryan, what is something you are excited to hopefully bring back to Kansas and the United States?
I just think an absolute appreciation for the United States. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's easy when you're home all the time. And also when you haven't ever left the country to take certain things for granted or have an appreciation, frankly, for the stability that our government provides as a small example. And it's easy again in America to think our government's a mess or it's chaotic or, all the things that you hear. But for all those things, the American experiment works in so many ways. And so I just have an ongoing appreciation, obviously, for what they're doing here and how quickly they're accelerating as a country and all that they've done. But really, it helps me appreciate, what we've done with the American experiment.
Once again, that was Ryan Gilliland from Topeka. Now we're joined by Lisa Schemm from Sharon Springs. Lisa, so far in your time in Brazil, what has been the coolest thing?
It's been interesting seeing the differences culturally from food to city living, even the farming practices and where a lot of those farms are even located. Because there's been a lot, like you'll see houses and then there will be a field.
And is that something you've consistently seen throughout all the travels?
So far, yes. But they're not like big acreage. It's small acreage.
What have been some other cultural things that you've seen that have kind of shocked you?
The food. I expected the food to maybe be a little more flavorful. So David and I are big foodies, so we kind of like our food. But it is bland. There is no salt and pepper on the tables. And I would have thought in this area there would have been more spices and different flavors. But instead, it's been pretty plain.
What are some things then that you've learned or seen that you hope to bring back to Kansas and the United States?
I think their ideas of conservation are really unique. So today we saw the hydropower plant, and I was talking with Carlos, and a lot here are really concerned about water, which I find very unique in the aspect that if we were in the United States, I feel like if we have water, we want to use it rather than having us here. They're more concerned about conserving it because they do use it for so much more than just living. They use it for power and they use it. I think it's just a way of living that in the United States, I think sometimes we take that for granted that water will always be there and it won't. So they're much more conservation minded in their water consumption and the use of it.
And that was Lisa Schemm from Sharon Springs. We're now joined by Janae McKinney from Manhattan. Janae, how's it been going?
It's been very warm, but it's been so exciting. It's been awesome to see all of the different plant life. I would say everything is green here, and I'm willing to bet it's green here every day of the year. Like it's phenomenal. Like the weather, I will say it's warm and it's humid, but like you're so distracted by all the amazing like views you're seeing and like the wildlife and plant life that you kind of like it's secondary to like all the cool things you're seeing here. And also all the people of Brazil have been phenomenal. I don't think we've had a bad experience between restaurants or tours or bus drivers. Anyone we meet has always been the most friendly people we could have.
What has been some cool wildlife you have seen?
We did get to see some capybaras, which was very exciting. I know we got to see them swimming in a pond. I think it was we went to a citrus farm at one of our like first 2 days in Brazil, and that was really exciting. And I think they had like little babies with them. So there was like a whole herd of them, like 20 capybaras just swimming around in one of their lakes, which was fun. We got to go to a bird park yesterday, and there was lots of different birds like macaws, parrots, parakeets. There was an anaconda at the bird park, which is unrelated to birds, but that was very exciting. And then some toucans. And I think someone mentioned they saw like a monkey. And then I don't know what the name is, but it's like a raccoon version of a Brazilian kind of animal that almost kind of looks like a raccoon mixed with a lemur. So we saw one of those.
So have you heard about any concerns from the producers over there of having control issues with all this wildlife?
I don't know it's necessarily a wildlife issue in some ways. I do know that like the bird park had a problem with, I think, like a jaguar getting in with some flamingos. So I think that was a problem. But I do think producers that we've talked to have shared similar concerns to farmers we've met with through our college springs in Kansas, where they face labor issues. They face wage issues with like competing businesses or competing farms like nearby, or we went to a paper mill yesterday and understanding that like there's like 5 mills in that same general vicinity. So like you're trying to fight for the same labor force, which is a common issue we have in America too. So very similar issues that I think both of them are facing.
And so as you've learned and seen some cool wildlife, what do you hope to bring back to Kansas and the United States?
I'm going to try and fit as much in my bag as humanly possible. It's currently on its edge, but I hope to just bring back a better awareness of what Brazil's up to. International ag, and I think that's always fascinating. And also just like helping people know about Brazil more, because I think like I don't think I knew as much about Brazil before I came. So I think just spreading awareness, but specifically, I think there's some snacks that I want to bring back. I think Brazilian chocolate has been very good. If I can smuggle orange juice back, I would love to do that. The orange juice here is fascinating. And then, yeah, just as many souvenirs as I can pack in my bag.
Once again, that was Janae McKinney from Manhattan, Kansas. On today's segment, we also heard from Lisa Schemm, Ryan Gilliland, and Trevor Pederson. If you'd like to learn more about the KARL program, you can do so by going to their website, KARLprogram.com. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Monday show discussing turkey vultures with K-State wildlife specialist Drew Ricketts. Drew, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Shelby.
Drew, as we're talking about turkey vultures, are they back in Kansas?
Yeah, so as this is going to air, we're basically in the last week of March, and the turkey vultures have been back in Kansas for 2 to 3 weeks, basically. And the birds that we're seeing now are still on that migratory path. Some of them may go ahead and stay put, but a lot of them are going to continue on north, and we'll gradually see more and more of these turkey vultures move through. Some of them will stick, some of them will move on through the next month or two.
And a lot of times when I think about turkey vultures, I think about some challenges. However, what is some value they bring to the economy?
One of the things that turkey vultures provide, or the main thing that they provide, is something that we probably don't think about all the time, and that's removal of organic matter in the form of dead animals. So they are a scavenger. They're not really predatory. They get almost all their calories from stuff that they find already being dead. And a group of researchers out of South America collected data in the United States, South America, and throughout the turkey vulture range, basically. And based on estimates of turkey vulture density estimates of how much a turkey vulture eats per day, and that was based on some experiments that they did themselves. And then also based on the density of livestock in different areas, they calculated that on an annual basis, and this was in like 2018 dollars, on an annual basis, turkey vultures provide about $760 million in ecological services in the form of removing that dead animal matter. And that was just based on livestock. That didn't think about, roadkill and those sorts of things. And, when we're thinking about these estimates that come out of papers, it's natural and it's good to be skeptical of some of these really big numbers. But, even if they were off a great deal and we're only seeing a third of that, that's still $250 million a year that these birds are providing in services through removing those dead animals.
While they are providing those removal services, what are some challenges they're also creating?
Really, the main challenges associated with turkey vultures are the roosts that they form. Those large roosts tend to be on large trees, cell phone towers, water towers, and those sorts of things. And when we get, anywhere from 10 to more than 50 of these very large birds roosting in the same spot night after night, we can see very large accumulations of feces. And when we think about bird feces, they have a high concentration of uric acid in them. And so they're acidic. They can cause damage to finishes on cars or boats or even water towers that they might be perching on. We can also see some health risks associated with those large accumulations of feces because of bacteria. There's odor associated with that. In rural areas, especially around big reservoirs and rivers, we can see large roosts of these birds near calving grounds or where people are lambing and that sort of thing. These birds are going to be attracted to the afterbirth or the dead animals that are there. I've heard some concerns from producers about the turkey vultures really riling the cattle up right after they've given birth, and concerns about them stomping on a calf and killing it, the cattle, I mean. And I haven't seen any direct evidence of that, but it's definitely a plausible thing that could happen. If we're thinking about control, these birds are protected. And so in towns where we've got these birds roosting, we tend to use a multi-tiered approach. So we would haze them by hanging up a fake dead vulture. We call those effigies. And then we would also use pyrotechnics as noise-making devices to scare them away. And the effigies by themselves don't work for very long very well. And the pyrotechnics by themselves don't work by themselves very well. But when we pair those two things, then we can see good control. We also, it's a drastic measure, but cutting that roost tree down may be the more practical approach for some people.
That was K-State Wildlife Specialist Drew Ricketts. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.